Before I get started on today's video, I just wanted to say a massive thank you to Alexander Lindqvist for choosing to back me on Patreon. Thank you, Alexander, that means a lot to me, and I hope you enjoyed today's video. Hey everybody, today I'm talking about my top 10 games that lived up to the hype. So these are the games where I was generally late to the party on playing, and by the time I did get to play them, they were already tremendously successful, had a lot of praise, really highly rated, and people generally telling me, you've got to play this game because it's the best thing since sliced bread. And when that happens, I think naturally as people, our kind of defenses go up and think, you know what, these can't be as good as you think they are, and it just puts even more pressure on the game to live up to your expectations. And if anything, that's a huge praise on these games to overcome that hurdle and still impress me. So these are 10 really great games. And another thing as well, these games have a big scope in terms of being really light to pretty involved and heavy games. So let's get started at number 10. So at number 10, I have That's Pretty Clever, or Ganz Schön Clever. So a couple of years ago, this game took off massively. Everybody's saying it's a great filler game, one of these first roll and write games where you are drafting dice and writing numbers on your little board and getting combinations and trying to basically puzzle out to get as many points as you can. And when I got to play this one, I thought, it's not going to be all that. It's just another roll and write game. By God, is this game fun. This game is probably one of the most addictive and satisfying games that I've played in my whole board gaming career. Really good fun, quick engaging decisions, a great solo mode. Just as I said, that satisfaction you get on playing this game and combining your different abilities to trigger one another and things. And people were saying, this is a game that I played, 200 times just trying to beat my own score. And I think, I've not got any, I'm not that interested. I gave it a go, not thinking much of it. And then before I knew it, I played the game, 70 times. Absolutely great fun, and one, I think, still one of the best roll and write games. And just because of that synergies and the combinations and the kind of domino effect of one thing triggering another. Ganz Schön Clever by Wolfgang Warsch. Fantastic little filler game. Next up, at number 9, I have The Quacks of Quedlinburg. So this one is a bit of a strange game because when it first came out, I think in Germany, it was starting to get a bit of buzz before it got to everywhere else. And people thinking, what is this game? It seems to be getting popular over there. And then it started kind of gaining momentum and cascading into England and such. And people saying this game is fantastic, it's such good fun, it's a pushy luck game with an element of bag building, and funny enough, another game by Wolfgang Warsch, so he's got the 10 and 9 space here. And I was thinking, I'll give it a go. I managed to go to a games club. But by this time, the game had already had a lot of wind under its sails, really popular, people singing from the rooftops about it. Gave it a go and thinking, okay, very simple rule set. I like bag building, I like pushy luck, let's give it a go. By round 2, I think I was absolutely hooked, just enjoying myself like I hadn't been in a long time. And just, loving what this game was delivering. Really fast-paced, really satisfying pushy luck gameplay, where you're drawing stuff from a bag, trying not to make your potion explode. That incentive of just pushing more and more and more was really visceral with this one, because you got abilities not only for for getting points, but you got the ability to invest in getting new ingredients for your bag as well. And I thought it was just a perfect storm of these simple mechanisms that build your bag building and pushy luck that came together wonderfully. And before the night was through, I think we had ordered a copy. And probably one of the most popular games of the last 2 years, just in general. A family-weighted game. Not much to it, but what it just does wonderfully, and there's just an element of magic about it that I can't quite put my finger on. That is Quacks of Quedlinburg at number 9. At number 8, I have Awkward Guests. So this was a game, actually, it was the Dice Tower that got this onto my radar. Tom Vassell was saying that this is the best deduction game he's ever played. He's a big fan of deduction, as am I, and so is my brother, who we play a lot of games together. Deduction games have been out for a while. There's not really much new that goes on in that genre, just slightly tweaks on the existing games. And by the end of the first game, I was like, I couldn't agree more. This is by far the best deduction game I've ever played. Just a most satisfying puzzle as you're trying to deduce who the murderer is for this particular case. Who is it? Have they got an accomplice? What weapon have they used? Where did they do it? And, well, not where did they do it, but what was their motive, etc. And this game just took it to the next level in terms of having a physical blueprint of the building, and you've got to map out where the murderer's been, who they've spoken to, who's seen them, etc. Just an absolutely wonderful puzzle that has this brilliant deck building system or kind of scenario building system where you take lots of different cards from and mesh them all together, and that will give you a unique scenario about who's going to be the murderer, what weapon they've used, etc. So infinite replayability based on this deck system, and since I've got this one, almost every other deduction game has just been knocked down a peg because nothing can chin up to this one. It's just so good. It's still quick, but still being really involved. Just the drama of it, the satisfaction of working out who it's going to be, it's mind-boggling. You've got to think outside the box sometimes, and there's great scalability as well in terms of its difficulty. If you want a really easy scenario, then go for it. Or do you want a really hard mystery that you've got to solve, then you can do that too. I think it's just a one-stop shop for deduction games, just absolutely phenomenal, and certainly lived up to the hype my initial impression was of this game. Next up at number 7, I have Maracaibo, now by Alexander Pfister, who at this time is one of my favourite designers ever. But when Maracaibo came out, I was a fan of Pfister, but I'd only played a couple of his games. I think I'd played Mombasa and some of his lighter games. And people were saying, Maracaibo is just his magnus opus. It's the best game he's ever had. It's a mix of all the different games he's built before then. And it's just, again, another a meshing of all his previous designs that was just a perfect example of what he can do. And I don't know what stopped me from playing this one as quickly as I probably should have. I probably played this about a year after it came out. And again, as soon as I played it, wow, that game has everything I like about Euro games. It's got hand management, it's got kind of stocks and shares, it's got engine building, it's got like a rondelle, it's got tracks, it's got everything. It's just a feast for all in terms of Euro games, while still not being... I don't think it's as intimidating as the rulebook would suggest. I mean, there are a lot of rules in this game. I said it is pretty much everything but the kitchen sink in this game, but it manages that in a wonderful kind of casing that's not too overwhelming. I think once you've played it, it's not one of those games you've got to keep relearning again and again because it's pretty intuitive. And still, I think I've played almost every Alexander Pfister game now, and this one is quite noticeably above the rest of his designs, at least in my eyes. I know a lot of people like Great Western Trail, but for me, Maracaibo is just the best of the best. It's one of the best games I've ever played. I think it's in my top 10 at this point. And I don't see it moving from there anytime soon. Just absolutely wonderful. One of the best Euro games I've ever played. One of the best kind of heavier games I've ever played. And just cannot say a bad word about this one. Would play this one anytime. And that incentive to go back to it as well is there, because the game does actually have a very interesting but slight narrative to it, which just adds that extra wrinkle of enjoyment for me personally. Wonderful game, Maracaibo. At number 6, I have Hansa Teutonica. Now, this is a game that is really much a staple, the backbone of the kind of Euro designs. This one's by Andreas Stedding and has been out since 2009. So this one still spoke about really highly today. People say it's one of the classic Euro designs, one that's not scared to get in your face and interact with your opponents in almost a nasty way. People saying, this is one of the best games out there that you need to have in your collection. I was sceptical to play it, not only because I'm a little bit of a Care Bear player, but when I got this to the table, finally in the big box version, because it was out of print for a long time, I just sat back and I can look objectively at it and think, you know what, this is a phenomenal design. Clean, crisp mechanisms, just putting cubes down on the board, trying to build routes, but blocking other players, making them not invest to get you out of the way so you can get bonuses, trying to control these different cities, investing in your player board to get upgrades and do more actions and get into the more valuable spaces in those cities. This game is just so well put together. It's streamlined to a T, just a great stripped back, clean Euro game with no bloat whatsoever. And I think when games can stand the test of time and just be praised for 10 plus years, There aren't many games that do that, and Hansa Teutonica is just a perfect example of that. And now I've got to play it, I think, you know what? Yeah, this is everything people were saying it was. Just a true classic design, and one that certainly lived up to the hype for me. That one is Hansa Teutonica at number 6. At number 5, I have a game kind of a similar vibe to Hansa Teutonica, not in its gameplay, but in the sense that it's stood the test of time. People spoke about it for a long time. A real kind of cult classic, and one that's remained high in the Board Game Geek rankings for a significant period. This one is Power Grid by Friedemann Friese. This one is an economic game that looks pretty bland, I think, from the face of it, a bit like Hansa Teutonica does, really. Where this one you are basically doing auctions for these power plants and then buying the resources on this kind of fluctuating market and trying to power as many power stations as you possibly can. By the end of the game, whoever powers the most power stations is going to be the winner. This one, it has a brilliant market where where you're choosing to bid on these things. It just is so clean as well, a bit like Hansa Teutonica again, where there is nothing here that doesn't need to be there. It flows really nicely, probably on the upper end of the timescale, maybe 90 to 120 minutes to play this one. But it works extremely well. It has that economical feel to it, where you're trying to get as much money as you can and reinvest that money to pay dividends, really. And considering this one is not the lightest of games, there's quite a lot of involvement in this one, quite mathy, as you are choosing to span out and build new power stations, paying the cost, etc. But I managed to teach this one to my mum, actually. My mum is not a gamer, really. We play the odd game with her, and she absolutely had a great time with this one, which I think just does a great job of saying how versatile this game is. Because me, as a pretty salty, dry Euro gamer, and my mum, who casually plays games, all enjoyed this one equally. Brilliant design, and again, one that I think is going to stay steadfast in the Board Game Geek rankings for a long time to come. Because I think when you have the pedigree and the design prowess of this game shows, then I think it again transcends time, and it will just stay in those rankings and just stay strong, because it's just that good. That is Power Grid at number 5. Next up, at number 4, I have Rococo by Matthias Kramer. Rococo was one of those games that was so hard to get hold of for a really long period of time. It was out of print, became that holy grail game. Everybody wanted it because it was so scarce or so difficult to get hold of. And last year, 2020, Eagle Gryphon Games reprinted this one in the deluxe version. And I managed to get to the table. I was very quickly in line to buy this one, and I was so impressed with the way this one played. On the face of it, it's a simple area control game, as you are, and I suppose set collection game, as you are getting resources and building, trading them in to build these dresses for these nobles and putting them in these dance halls to get majorities of those halls to get victory points. And you're also investing in different decorations and things. Which, how many games do that? Loads. That's fine. That was decent. But on top of that, you had this really interesting hand management system where you would have different kind of apprentices and journeymen and master designers, really, that would not only allow you to take certain worker placement spots, but they would also allow you to do certain actions based on those cards as well. And you really had to weigh up at what cards you were taking into your hand and what you're going to do on your turn by managing those card systems, knowing when to get rid of them, knowing when to buy new ones, and so on. And that meshed with the area control aspect and the kind of gather resources aspect all came together in such a classic design, in my opinion, and it just comes together a lot stronger than a lot of these generic Euros do. And I think a lot of people would say, this game is one of those games that had maybe unnecessary hype built behind it, because it was so hard to get hold of. That almost rose-tinted glasses. But for me, the gameplay really did stand on its own, and I was left really impressed by this one. Not only because of the beautiful visual aspect of it, but that gameplay in itself was really strong, razor sharp, and just interesting decisions throughout. And for me, that's what I want in my games, and Rococo certainly did that, and left me massively impressed despite the years and years of hype, of pressure put on this one. So at number 4, I have Rococo. At number 3, I probably have one of the most prolific board games of all time. This one is Puerto Rico by Andreas Seyfarth. This one was the number 1 ranked board game of all time for a long time. It's a kind of a role selection game. You're choosing one of these tiles, which will give you a bonus. But not only do you get that bonus, everybody else gets to do that action as well, but you get a slightly improved version of it. And in this game, you're essentially trying to gather workers and build different buildings on your, I suppose, little plantation, gather crops, ship them off for profit, and all these different things. But that role selection, it just is where this game really shines for me. And also in the terms of how the player interaction comes together, because you've got to be really wary about the other players' positions. Because if you choose a certain action, you've got to bear in mind that you can't just take your own position into consideration and think, I want this action, so I'm taking it. You've got to really consider about the position of the other players, because you can hugely benefit them if you take a specific action, and you've got to know when to sit back and think, what, I'm confident you're going to take that action because it's going to benefit you. Therefore, I'm going to do something else and not play into your hands. And that comes together in a really strong way. And I think people often consider that as a negative for the game, where, people who are experienced with playing it are going to just rinse somebody who isn't experienced in playing it. But I think that's just a testament to the design, where the best players are going to win, and being cognizant and wary about the positions of other players is actually something to consider in this game, which isn't so much the case in a lot of Euro games now. A game that's, I think, again, 10 plus years old, maybe even towards the 20 plus years old, and one that still feels razor sharp, feels fresh, just a clean bunch of rules, nothing in this game that doesn't need to be there, and probably one of the most objectively well put together games I've ever played, and one that I can never ever see leaving my collection. Puerto Rico, just an absolute magnificent design. At number 2, ironically, is my favourite game of all time. This is El Grande. Now, when I got into the hobby, I kind of, as you're learning, getting the information overload, I'd always see people going back to El Grande saying, this is the best area control game ever. It's the forefather of the genre. It's the best example of that. And I thought, okay, that's piqued my interest. Look at the game, looks pretty dry, themeless, which doesn't bother me, but something I take into consideration because I play with other players as well. And I took a punt on this one, before I knew the pedigree of Wolfgang Kramer and stuff like that. Played this one and thought, wow, is this a good game? I played, I don't know how many area control games, area majority games over the years, and this one still is by far the best design in my eyes. It's a game where you've got to basically spread your different caballeros on these different regions to control to get points. You have the most there, you're going to get the most points. The second most there is going to get the second most points, etc. That sounds pretty standard. How many games do that? But this game has a few extra wrinkles and a few extra layers that just take this game and transcend it to that upper echelon of just elite pedigree of games. For example, in order to take actions, you need to bid on the priority of drafting the actions that are available. And that's an interesting decision in itself, because you have a limited hand of cards, and if you spend your most priority cards in order to get the action first, then you are sacrificing bringing workers into your area to deploy. So, and likewise, if you play the lower priority cards, then you get loads of workers into your pool. And having that is really important. So you need to have this kind of cash flow, or this worker flow, of keeping people into your pool to be able to deploy them in the first place. So that's really cool in itself. Another thing, you have this opaque tower on the board, where you end up basically secretly putting people into this board, which is another area control thing, where you, at the end of the round, you're going to reveal them, and whoever's got the most in there is going to get points. But then you can secretly deploy them on different regions on the board, which can affect the scoring, which is another cool thing as well. And on top of that, you've got all the different changing powers from turn to turn. You've got restrictions on the board, because you can only ever deploy where the king is, or at least do adjacent regions to that king, which again can be a really important factor to bear in mind. Knowing when to push and pull and lay back and know when to sacrifice a strong turn is so important in this game. And to be honest, I generally prefer strategic games. This one leans more towards that tactical side of things, but because I'm so razor focused and engaged from start to finish throughout, I just think, you know, for an hour and a half game, this one just flies by, just constantly fun from start to finish. The constant flux of the board is just there, and still the strongest example of an area control game that I've ever played. And you know, naturally, my favourite game of all time is going to be on this list. And again, 25 years old now, and still feels as fresh as anything on the market. That is El Grande at number 2. And finally, at number 1, I have Barrage. Now, Barrage is a really heavy game about gathering water in dams as it trickles down this mountain, and then converting that water into energy, building power stations, building conduits, managing your machinery to build new things. Lots of things going on in this game, which I can't cover in a minute or two. But needless to say, I absolutely love it. But the reason why this is number 1 rather than El Grande, which is my number 1 game of all time, is simply because my level of enjoyment was, or the margin in between my level of enjoyment and my expectations of the game was much bigger. I was expecting to enjoy it, naturally, but I enjoyed it way more than I thought I would. I was expecting it to be good, but it was magnificent, and certainly one of the best games I've ever played. One of the most interactive, unique, and just a fresh idea and a fresh concept. Great player interaction, just surprisingly easy to teach as well, considering how heavy this game is. Just ticks all the boxes for me, and one of the games I just sat back and thought, wow, this is a phenomenal design. Just one of the best games I've played in years, and I couldn't believe that I waited as long as I did to get this game, and I can't believe I actually sat there looking at the Kickstarter page thinking, you know what, it doesn't look that good, I'll pass on it. And what a silly decision that was, because this game is magnificent. Unfortunately, I think it came out a couple of years ago now, and I only played it this year, and I can't explain that why I did that, but needless to say, I'm so happy I've got it in my collection now, and certainly not only lived up to the hype, but way overshot that hype that I was thinking of it. And for me, when the pressure is that much on a game and it still delivers, that is just the highest praise you can give. So that concludes my top 10 games that lived up to the hype. Check all these games out, they're all absolutely fantastic, and I think it's quite a nice list because you've got something as light as Ganshon Clever, or That's Pretty Clever, and something as involved as Barrage on it, so there's something for everyone here. If you have enjoyed the review, please hit like and subscribe to my channel, and check out my other videos too. For everyone else, I'll see you next time on Chairman of the Board. Bye.